Move faster, kid. The driver shouted as the car stalled in the middle of the highway. The young man rushed to help the woman standing helplessly by the hood. Her trembling hands and torn business suit showed she was heading somewhere far more important than he was. His phone buzzed. "You're already late for the interview. This is your last chance." He clenched his fists. The choice between his future and helping a stranger felt like a cruel joke. He had no idea this woman would be the one to change his destiny forever. He felt his heart pounding in his temples but still bent over the engine. The woman stood beside him, glancing from him to her watch as if weighing whether to speak or remain silent. Her gaze was far too sharp for a random passerby. In her hand she clutched a folder so tightly that a sheet slipped out, stamped in bold red letters, "Confidential." The engine finally roared back to life, and she whispered, "You don't realize what you just saved." She threw a business card into his hand and vanished into the crowd. He stood with dirty hands, a broken heart, and the thought that he had just lost his only shot at the job. But had he really? His fingers tightened around the card, then he noticed the extra paper he had picked up by accident. Confidential. Traffic surged around him, horns blaring, but all he could hear was the echo of her words. He glanced at the card, no name, just a number. No company, no title. His pulse quickened. The air smelled of gasoline and tension, and for a moment he felt as though the whole city was pressing down on his shoulders. "Damn it," he muttered, shoving the paper into his jacket pocket. He ran toward the bus stop, but every step felt heavier. Passengers stared, some whispering, others shaking their heads. He felt the sting of shame and frustration. The interview was gone. He had blown it. Or maybe something bigger had just begun. The bus doors slammed shut, and he jumped in at the last second. As he sank into the seat, his phone buzzed again. A different message this time: "We saw what you did. Call us." No name. No number saved. Just the words. His hands trembled. Who was "we"? How could they know? He looked around the bus, half expecting to see her face again, but all he saw were strangers. Tired eyes, worn clothes, the usual city crowd. And yet, for the first time, he felt as though every single one of them was watching him. He clenched the card tighter. He thought he was chasing one chance at life, a simple job, a stable paycheck. But in that moment, deep inside, he knew, this was no accident. He was caught in something far larger, and the first choice had already been made for him. The bus rattled through the city, but his eyes were fixed on the glowing words on his phone: "We saw what you did. Call us." Every vibration of the engine seemed to echo inside his chest. His first instinct was to delete the message, pretend it never arrived. But his hand froze. No, he couldn't just ignore it. Something about that card, that woman, the way she vanished into the crowd, it refused to leave him. He pulled out the card again. Plain. Cold. Just a number. His thumb hovered over the screen. If this was a trap, it was already too late. If it was real, maybe he hadn't lost everything. He took a shaky breath and dialed. The line clicked instantly. Silence. Then a man's voice, calm but firm: "You kept the paper, didn't you?" His stomach dropped. He looked around the bus, scanning faces: a mother with her child, a man in a construction jacket, an old woman knitting. None of them looked back. Still, he felt exposed. "What do you want from me?" His voice was sharper than he expected. The reply came without hesitation: "Not here. Not now. Go home. Check your mailbox. Then decide." The line went dead. He sat frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear. Go home? Mailbox? He almost laughed, it sounded absurd. But then again, so did everything that had just happened. He pressed his forehead against the cold window, fighting the storm of thoughts. By the time the bus screeched to his stop, the decision was made. He couldn't walk away, not now. Something inside him, pride, anger, maybe even desperation, demanded answers. The stairwell of his old apartment smelled of dust and iron. He shoved his key into the lock, heart pounding harder than after any job interview. Before going inside, he checked the mailbox. A thin envelope lay there, blank except for his name, written in bold black ink. He tore it open with shaking hands. Inside, not a letter, not instructions. Just a single photograph. A picture of him, taken that very morning, seconds before he touched the hood of the woman's car. His chest tightened. Someone had been there. Watching. Recording. He stumbled into his apartment, the door slamming shut behind him. The cheap walls and peeling paint no longer felt like home, they felt like a cage. He dropped the photo on the table, staring at it as if it might speak. One thing was clear, this wasn't random. He was already part of something. And the worst part, he had no idea what it was. But one decision pressed against his ribs like a blade: walk away now and try to erase it, or step forward and risk everything. He paced across the small room, the photograph burning on the table like a warning sign. Someone had been there, camera ready, before he even touched the car. He clenched his fists. This wasn't coincidence. Whoever they were, they had planned for him. The phone buzzed again. A new message: tomorrow. 8 a.m., corner of 5th and Main. Don't be late. His throat tightened. Tomorrow? He should ignore it, go look for another job, pretend none of this happened. But the photographs screamed otherwise. They knew his name, his face, his choices. If he ran, they'd still find him. He shoved the envelope aside and tried to breathe. That's when a knock rattled the door. Sharp, urgent, 3 times. His heart leapt. For a moment he thought it was them already. He crept closer, pressed his ear against the wood. It's me, open up. The voice was familiar. His neighbor, Daniel, a man in his late 40s who worked nights as a security guard. Reliable, quiet, always kept to himself. He opened the door cautiously. Daniel's eyes darted around the hallway before he stepped inside. You need to be careful, he said quickly. People don't just leave things like that in your mailbox. The young man froze. How do you know? Daniel hesitated, then pulled out his phone. A blurred photo appeared on the screen, the same woman by the broken car. I saw her yesterday near the complex. She wasn't lost. She was waiting. His stomach sank. Waiting, for me? Daniel didn't answer. He just shoved the phone back into his pocket and muttered, "You don't want to get involved with these people." But it was too late. The young man couldn't shake the thought, if Daniel knew, then Daniel was already part of it. 2 lives tangled now, not just one. He picked up the business card again, weighing it in his palm. I'm going tomorrow, he said, surprising even himself with the certainty in his voice. If I don't, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then you're walking straight into the fire. The room fell into silence. Only the hum of the fridge filled the air. Then, from the hallway outside, footsteps stopped right at his door. Not a knock this time. Just waiting. He and Daniel exchanged a look, every muscle tensed. Whoever was outside knew he was there. And then came a voice, cold and deliberate through the door. We told you not to wait until tomorrow. The voice outside the door froze him in place. Daniel instinctively reached for the old metal baton he carried from work, his eyes narrowing. The young man's palms were slick with sweat. What do they mean, not tomorrow, he whispered. Daniel motioned for silence. A slow scrape ran across the door, like someone dragging a finger over the wood. Then footsteps retreated down the hall. He exhaled sharply, but the silence felt heavier than the threat. Whoever it was, they wanted him to know they could come closer anytime. Daniel spoke first. "You see now? This isn't a game. They're not waiting until morning." His voice was firm, but there was something else in it too, fear. The young man's jaw clenched. He refused to crumble. "Then I need to know what they want." He grabbed the card, stuffing it into his pocket. He didn't wait for Daniel's approval. He pushed out the door, scanning the hallway. Empty. Only a single envelope taped to his neighbor's door. His pulse quickened as he tore it free. Inside, another photo, this time of him on the bus earlier that day. Someone had followed him the entire time. Anger pushed out the fear. "They're watching every move," he muttered. It was a loss, privacy gone, choices exposed, but also a clue. If they wanted him alive, it meant he had value. He stormed down the stairwell, Daniel following reluctantly. "Where are you going?" To end this, he shot back, though the truth was he had no plan. But retreat was no longer possible. On the street, the city buzzed with its usual chaos, indifferent to the storm unraveling inside him. He pulled out his phone, dialing the number on the card again. This time, the line clicked faster. A woman's voice answered, steady, cold. "You're earlier than expected." His breath caught. The same woman? He could still hear the echo of her plea on the highway. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but all that came out was, "Why me?" For a heartbeat, he thought she might actually tell him. Her pause stretched long, then she replied, "Because you were the only one who didn't look away." The line went dead again. The words rang inside him, almost like praise, almost like a threat. Daniel stared at him, waiting for an explanation. But he had none. Then a car screeched around the corner, headlights blinding. It slowed just enough for the back window to roll down. A hand slipped out, holding a folded piece of paper, dropping it onto the street before the vehicle roared away. He picked it up with trembling fingers. Inside, scrawled in black ink, "Come alone. Midnight. Pier 17. The paper in his hand felt heavier than stone. Midnight. Pier 17. He glanced at Daniel, who shook his head firmly. "You can't go. This reeks of a trap." "I don't have a choice," the young man replied. "If I ignore them, they'll just come closer. You saw what they did already." His voice cracked with frustration. For years he had fought for scraps, jobs that never called back, interviews that ended before they began. And now, when he finally made one unselfish choice, it pulled him into this. He couldn't tell if it was punishment or opportunity. The hours crawled. He sat at the table, staring at the photo of himself on the bus. He remembered the shame in people's eyes, the way they looked at him like he didn't belong anywhere. It burned inside him. Maybe that was why he refused to back down now, because for once, someone seemed to think he was worth watching. At 11:30 he stood, grabbed his worn jacket, and slipped the business card into his pocket. Daniel blocked the doorway. "If you go, don't expect me to save you." "I never asked you to," he said quietly, pushing past him. But the hurt in Daniel's eyes stung. This wasn't just his choice anymore, it was dragging others with him. The streets were colder at night, the city harsher. Each step toward the waterfront tightened the knot in his stomach. He thought about turning back a dozen times, but each time he imagined the word coward stamped across his chest. He couldn't live with that. Pier 17 was nearly deserted. The smell of salt and rust filled the air. He approached slowly, scanning the shadows. Midnight struck on a distant church bell, echoing through the empty docks. Over here, a voice whispered. Not the woman's voice. Deeper, rougher. From behind a stack of crates. He moved closer, fists clenched. A man stepped out, face hidden beneath a hood. You came alone. Good. That means you're smarter than most. He tossed a small envelope at his feet. Inside you'll find your first task. The young man bent down, heart pounding. But before he could open it, headlights flashed across the pier. A car screeched to a halt. The hooded man swore under his breath, then vanished into the dark. The young man ripped the envelope open with shaking hands. One line of text stared back at him: trust no one. Not even Daniel. The words on the paper cut deeper than the night air: trust no one. Not even Daniel. He stared at them under the pier lights, his chest heaving. The man in the hood had vanished, leaving only questions and a chill running through his spine. He turned back slowly, his mind racing. Daniel had warned him, helped him, even risked showing that photo of the woman. Could it all have been a lie? His feet dragged against the concrete as he walked away from the water, his body heavy with fatigue. Each step felt like a fight. By the time he reached his building, his head throbbed. Daniel's door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the hall. He froze. He remembered the photo, Daniel's urgency, his warnings. And now, the envelope's message. His pulse hammered in his ears. He pushed the door wider. Daniel sat at the table, papers spread out before him. Not work reports. Not casual notes. The young man's own photograph stared back at him from the pile, the same image that had been stuffed into his mailbox. Daniel looked up sharply, eyes narrowing. You weren't supposed to see this. His voice was low, almost regretful. The young man stepped back, every muscle ready to bolt. So it's true. You've been part of this from the start. Daniel sighed, running a hand over his face. It's not that simple. You don't understand who you're dealing with. He shoved the papers into a folder, but not before another detail caught the young man's eye: a second photo of the woman at the car, this one taken hours before she ever broke down on the highway. His stomach twisted. She hadn't just been unlucky. She had been planted. Why me? He demanded, voice cracking under the weight of exhaustion and anger. Why did you drag me into this? Daniel's lips tightened. Because you were the only one who stopped. They needed someone like that. And now, they'll test how far you'll go. The young man's knees nearly buckled. His body screamed for rest, but his mind was on fire. He wanted to slam the door, to run, to bury himself under the weight of blankets and forget this night. But instead, he clenched his fists tighter. He couldn't back down now. Daniel stood, folder in hand. You think you're ready for answers. You're not. But tomorrow, you'll either prove yourself, or you'll be erased from this city like you never existed. The young man swallowed hard, his body trembling. For a second, he thought Daniel might finally explain everything. Instead, Daniel walked past him into the hallway, leaving the folder on the table. The folder was unlocked. The choice was his: open it now and risk everything, or wait and follow Daniel into the unknown. The folder sat on the table like a trap. His fingers hovered before he tore it open, heart hammering. Pages spilled out, names, dates, photos. Strangers. And then, his own name circled in red, underlined twice. Beneath it, asset. Disposable. His chest caved. He staggered back, bile rising in his throat. They didn't see him as a person. He was just a tool, and once used, discarded. Rage surged through the exhaustion, but before he could react, Daniel reappeared in the doorway, face like stone. You weren't supposed to see that. The young man's voice cracked. So it's true. You've been working against me from the start. Daniel didn't deny it. He stepped closer, lowering his tone. I tried to shield you. But now they'll come faster. You forced their hand. The betrayal cut deeper than any word on paper. The one person he thought might be on his side had been part of the machine pulling his strings. His knees buckled against the weight of it, palms pressed to the table for balance. For a moment, he wanted to collapse, to let it all end here. But then, buried at the back of the folder, he spotted something else, a small photograph, creased at the edges. The woman from the car, smiling, not broken, not desperate. She stood in front of a building with a sign that read, Hope Foundation. A flicker of strength ignited inside him. She wasn't just bait. She had another face, another life. And maybe, just maybe, it held the key to understanding why he had been chosen. He clenched the photo in his hand. I'm not disposable. Not anymore. His voice trembled but didn't break. Daniel's jaw tightened. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. Then you'd better run, because they're already on their way. As if on cue, glass shattered from the window. A black object clattered to the floor, smoke hissing, filling the room. The young man coughed, eyes burning, ears ringing with Daniel's final words. You won't survive the night if you don't choose who to trust. The room filled with smoke, choking and blinding. He dropped to the floor, crawling toward the door as Daniel's silhouette vanished in the haze. This way. Daniel's voice shouted, but doubt tore at him. The note had warned, don't trust him. He stumbled into the hallway, lungs burning, vision blurred. Shadows moved on the staircase, dark figures rushing upward. Instinct screamed, if they caught him here, it was over. He bolted down the back stairwell, kicking the door open into the freezing night air. His chest heaved as he ran through alleys, clutching the photo of the woman from the Hope Foundation. Something about that smile haunted him. Was she a savior or just another mask in their game? The memory of her broken voice by the car tangled with the image in the photo, two versions of the same woman, neither fully real. At the corner of 7th Street he stopped, bent over, gasping. His phone buzzed again. This time no text, only a photo. The woman, sitting at a desk inside the Hope Foundation building, time-stamped 15 minutes ago. She was alive. She was close. He gritted his teeth. He could turn himself in, follow Daniel's path, play the pawn. Or he could go after her, the only lead that tied every thread together. The risk was obvious, it could be bait. But standing still would mean being hunted until he broke. He made his choice. He headed toward the address printed faintly at the bottom of the photo. The streets blurred past, each step heavier than the last, his body screaming for rest, his mind spinning with fragments of truth. When he reached the Foundation's building, the glass doors reflected his own worn figure back at him. Inside, lights still burned. He pressed his hand against the cool surface, heart hammering, ready to push forward. Then, from behind the glass, she appeared. The same woman he had saved on the highway, only this time, she wasn't desperate or broken. She stood tall, calm, and her eyes locked on his like she had been waiting all along. Her lips moved slowly, deliberately. Though he couldn't hear her through the glass, he read the words clear as day. You shouldn't have come. Her words through the glass cut deeper than any threat. You shouldn't have come. For a heartbeat he froze, palms still pressed against the door. Then the lock clicked, and the woman stepped into the lobby, every trace of panic from the highway gone. She was composed, almost commanding. You don't understand what they've done, she said, her voice low, sharp. By following me here, you've made yourself the target, not the witness. He clenched his fists. Then tell me the truth. Why me? Before she could answer, another voice echoed across the lobby. Daniel. He emerged from the shadows, folder still in his hand. Because you were never supposed to survive that day. The young man's stomach dropped. You set me up. Daniel shook his head slowly. No. I tried to shield you. But they wanted someone who would act, someone who couldn't walk away. That's why she staged the breakdown. He pointed at the woman, who stood unflinching. And it worked. The young man staggered back, his chest tightening. Betrayal on both sides, yet neither denying it. His life had been nothing more than a test. The woman finally spoke again, softer this time. It wasn't to destroy you. It was to see if you could carry what comes next. What comes next? His voice cracked, every nerve burning. Daniel tossed the folder onto the floor. Pages scattered, files, contracts, surveillance shots. At the top of the pile, one sheet stood out, his resume. The same one he had sent to dozens of companies, ignored for months. But here it was, stamped with bold letters, selected candidate. His head spun. All this, the interview, the breakdown, the chase, had been orchestrated long before he ever touched that car. Rage surged through the confusion. You stole my life and turned it into some experiment. The woman stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. No. We gave you a chance no one else ever would. He wanted to scream, to tear the pages apart. Instead, exhaustion dragged at him, body trembling, mind splintering. He was standing on the edge of collapse, the edge of choice, trust them and lose himself, or fight them and lose everything. The silence shattered as headlights flared through the lobby windows. A caravan of black cars screeched to a halt outside. Armed figures spilled out, surrounding the building. The woman's voice turned urgent. Decide now. With us, or against us. His breath caught as the glass doors rattled under heavy boots. The final wall between him and the truth was about to explode. The lobby trembled as boots thundered against the glass. The young man's pulse raced, caught between Daniel's warning and the woman's command. With us, or against us. He looked at the shattered folder on the floor, his resume stamped, selected candidate. His life, twisted into someone else's experiment. For a moment, he wanted to collapse under the weight of it. Then he remembered the bus, the stairs, the whispers, the shame of being invisible. And the highway, the moment he had chosen to help instead of walk away. That was who he was. Not their pawn, not their asset. His choice mattered. He lifted the photograph of the woman smiling in front of the Hope Foundation. He held it up. If this was all a test, he said, voice steady, then here's my answer, I don't follow orders. I set my own path. The woman's eyes flickered, surprise, then something like respect. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then you'd better be ready to fight for it. The doors burst open. Armed figures surged inside. Chaos exploded, shouts, gunmetal glinting, boots pounding. Daniel grabbed the young man's arm, pulling him behind cover. For once, there was no deception in his face. If you want freedom, you'll have to earn it right now. The next minutes blurred into raw survival, dodging, running, struggling against hands that tried to drag him down. Every bruise, every gasp reminded him he was still standing, still refusing to break. And when the smoke cleared, he found himself outside, the cold night air filling his lungs like victory. Behind him, the foundation building burned, not with fire, but with the collapse of lies he no longer carried. The woman stood at the doorway, watching silently, her expression unreadable. Daniel limped past her without a word. They were part of the game still. But he wasn't. He walked into the street, shoulders squared. He had no job, no certainty, no plan. But for the first time, he felt alive. He hadn't been chosen, he had chosen himself. The city stretched before him, wide and unforgiving, yet full of possibility. He looked at the photo one last time, then let the wind carry it from his hand. His story wasn't written by them anymore. It was his to create. And as the first light of dawn broke across the skyline, he smiled through the pain. He had survived betrayal, manipulation, fear. And now he carried something they could never control, his will. Not disposable. Not forgotten. Free.